not to the states.
To keep for our country, because the federal government needs it too, not just the states. But out of that, we oftentimes choose, as an example, we have almost 10,000 ventilators, and we are ready to rock with those ventilators. We're going to bring them to various areas of the country that need them. But when he says our, he's talking about our country. He's talking, he's talking about the federal government. I mean, it's such a basic, simple question, and you try and make it sound so bad. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. You know what? You ought to be ashamed. It's such a simple question. He said our, and our means for the country, and our means for the states, because the states are a part of the country. Don't make it sound bad. Don't make it sound bad. Go ahead, Steve. Go ahead, back here. You just asked your question. You just asked your question in a very nasty tone. Let's go.
You didn't give me an answer.
Please.
Mr. President,
I gave you a perfect answer. You know it. Go ahead.
well, just to follow up on that, when we have the federal stockpile, I mean, isn't that designed to be able to distribute to the states?
Sure, but it's also needed for the federal government. We have a federal stockpile, and they have state stockpiles. And frankly, many of the states were totally unprepared for this. So we had to go into the federal stockpile. But we're not an ordering clerk. They have to have for themselves. Now, some of the states were in good shape. Some of the states were not in good shape. That's probably something you could expect. We have been helping states. We have been spending a tremendous amount of time, effort, and billions of dollars on making sure that they have what they have. I mean, take New York. We built them hospitals. I built them 4 hospitals, built them medical centers, sent a ship with 1,000 rooms and 12 operating rooms. And then on top of that, gave vast numbers of ventilators and vast numbers of surgical gowns, equipment, masks, everything else. Now, they had a chance to order ventilators over the years. They had a chance to order a very big, but they didn't choose to do it. We were there and we helped them. And I think the governor of New York is very thankful for the help that we gave. But we have a stockpile. It's a federal stockpile. We can use that for states, or we can use it for ourselves. We do use it for the federal government. We have a very big federal government. Go ahead.
You decided not to use your powers to be essentially a traffic cop for all the essential medical supplies that are needed.
We're not a traffic cop. We're a humanitarian cop. We help. It's like the ships. Do you think we wanted to take 2 big ships into our country that have obvious problems, and you know the problems I'm talking about? So I have a decision to make. Do I take them in, or do I save lives? Okay? Do I take them in, or do I save? I decided to take them in. And we have tremendous protection. We have great doctors there to help the people. They had 4 or 5 people that died. That was as of last night. They died on the ships. We took care of it. And now the people are in the process of, and many are already back in Canada, they're back in the UK, United Kingdom, and many of them were American citizens. Some were very sick. We're taking care of the sick people. We're testing all of the others very, very carefully. Very, very carefully. They are being tested like you wouldn't believe. And we solve a humanitarian catastrophe. You know why? Because nobody else would take the ships. Nobody else would take them. So we docked them in, I think, Fort Lauderdale.
Why you don't say we're the federal government and there's a shortage of masks and other things, and we're going.
We do say that. We say, and we use the act. Excuse me. We do say that, and we use the act, and we've used it a number of times very powerfully, and a lot of times we don't have to use it because we say we're going to use it if you don't do this or that. And then we also have companies that act incredibly well. We have plenty of them, mostly them. But we've used the act very powerfully. And a lot of times you don't have to exercise the act. All you have to do is tell them, look, if you don't do this, we're going to use the act. And we've done a good job with it, maybe a great job. Yeah.
Mr. President, there are news reports that you want to sign the stimulus checks that are going out here in several months. Is that right? Do you want to sign those checks?
Me sign? No. There's millions of checks. I'm going to sign them? No. It's a Trump administration initiative. But do I want to sign them? No. The people are getting their money. There's a lot of stimulus going in a lot of different ways. There's also stimulus going for companies that would, if it weren't for our government, would not. And some companies that were very strong a month ago. Again, we had the strongest economy in the world. We had our best ever. We had probably the best economy in the history of the world, bigger than China, bigger than anybody. And one day we have to say, close it up, stop. Everybody go home. And you know what? It's pretty tough to do that.
That's another thing, that there are rumors that these checks may not go out for another 4 months. Like if you don't
I
have
don't
a
know.
check
All I can
deposit-
tell you is the small business today is that we're way ahead of schedule. There is a problem where, and which I pointed out, I said you shouldn't do it this way, with unemployment. We're 40-year-old equipment by the states. We're sending the money to the states. Once the money is sent to the states, then the states, whether they're Republican or Democrat, have to get the money out to the people. Hopefully they'll be able to do it. But many of those states have 40-year-old computers. I don't know that they're equipped. I wanted to give the money direct, if that's what you're talking about. I wanted to give the money out direct. It would have been much easier. But the Democrats and some people said, no, let's do it the complicated
I'm
way.
talking more about the stimulus checks. Like,
All right, well, I was
Well,
talking
people
about,
get their
excuse me,
money.
I was talking about both.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll get it. They will. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to ask questions both for myself and some of the other reporters who aren't in the room, social distancing. First of all, and this is for yourself and Dr. Burks, what percentage of the population do we suspect to be asymptomatic at this point? Is there a way to figure that out? Seems like the antibody test might be able to assist in determining that number.
Yeah, thank you. So while we're working diligently in the midst of the crisis to make sure that the healthcare workers and everyone who is sick gets provided for, at the same time, we're working on tests and assays that will be critical for surveillance. And at the same time, working on plans for what we need to do as this moves through the population and we get on the downside where we're not there yet. And hopefully most of the states will say, like California and Washington, and then what we need to do to be prepared for fall. So all three of those things are happening simultaneously, and there's people working on each one of those work streams. The antibody piece is critical, as you described, because at this time, we can't, if we have, let's say asymptomatic status is inversely related to age. And so the younger you are, the more likely you are to be asymptomatic. We have to know that because we have to know how many people have actually become infected. So when we talked about 5 days ago, I think on Monday, I called on universities to work on an ELISA-based test to test for their health workers and really get through that. At the same time, the private sector is working on tests. And what do we want those tests to be? We want those tests to be like what we use for HIV and malaria. Finger prick onto a cassette, you get a line if you're positive, and you get a control line. Negative, the line isn't there, and there's the control line. That's our dream assay because it's a finger prick. In the meantime, we're not waiting, we're pushing for that. At the same time, we're asking to develop an assay, the ELISA-based assay, which requires a tube of blood. And that's why we're also talking about, could we use dry blood spots? We also put out call directly out to the military because of the Roosevelt to really test all of the sailors on the Roosevelt with an antibody test to get to this